All right. Doesn't seem to be working, at least on my end, so let me try again. Okay, so it appears to be working now. And okay, so do a little bit on, finish up just a little bit on labor unions and then the changes in Europe and talk about fascism and things like that over the next few days. And I did put a couple of assignments online. The first one is the test, and the test will be due, well, I'm going to give you the rest of the week. I'd like it done by Friday at midnight. Please don't do it at 11:30. I will accept late assignments, but let me know why it's late. And I will give you all sorts of benefit of the doubt. I understand this is really hard, but please just let me know. I'm giving you 4 days. That's why I'm putting it up early. I'm also putting up a World War II map. And my plan is for you to copy it and then write on it and print it out. If you have trouble doing that, let me know and we will work something out. But just a map of Europe and the Pacific and give you an idea of the scope of the fighting in World War II. And so I'm putting that out today. And don't forget, yesterday I did have a 10-question quiz. It should have been, almost all of you got it done. Looks like you're doing very well on it. So just get that done over the next couple days. The thing about that test, it is 3 short answer questions. Each short answer question, for example, the first one, which all of you have to do, will be on the causes of the Great Depression. That means you have to come up with 3 short IDs, topics on your own, then write 3 short IDs for each one. So that's 9 total, 27 sentences, not that many if it's only 27 sentences. And that's why I'm giving you a little bit of time to work on it. And there'll be a little element of the last question I'll finish up today. And then the other thing is, I'm just finishing up the review packet for the AP exam, and I'm trying to tailor it for your use during the DBQ, because the AP exam appears it's going to be 1 DBQ, something between 1754 and 1945 that you're going to have to finish. And so those are the few things. Let me make sure this is working. Okay, it appears to be working pretty well. And so I have just a little left to finish on labor. It's only a few people listening today, a lot more yesterday, but you know, that's why I'm recording this online. And if there's any issues, please let me know. Drop me a note. I'm getting notes all over the place, and if I don't respond right away, I will. Or secondly, if you ask me something about a grade, I could change it. I saw your message and I made the shift because I've had some assignments given on the chat room, on Teams. I've had some assignments on Gmail, some on school email, and so it's hard to keep track of everything. And so I'm getting it, and I'll get it out to you. So if you have any questions, please respond there. I believe we are good. Starting tomorrow, I am going to take a few minutes and I'm going to set up 2 things. And I'm going to set it up on Teams tomorrow. And so if there's any questions you have to ask, I'm going to set down a meeting at 9:15, 9:30. I like about this time. That gives me a little leeway before 9:30 to get this out. But I'm going to start setting up, so if you have any questions you want to personally ask me, I'll be there. And also about the test that's coming up. So let's go ahead and get started. So I mentioned about labor unions, about Keynesian economics, which was the biggie. And remember, Keynesian economics was demand side. And so this is really the opposite of trickle-down economics in many ways. But these are capitalistic. Both of them believe in some element of capitalism. But trickle-down, the idea was that the very wealthy, the elite, they have the skill set and the knowledge to make this work and to get production to all levels, supposedly, where it is different for Keynesian economics, which is to pump money into the hands of workers and to try to get as much competition as possible and to try to encourage innovation, to encourage consumer spending, to put more power in the hand of workers with higher wages. And so please look at that again. Oh, I will put yesterday's and today's PowerPoint online. I didn't quite do it yesterday because I had just a little bit left to finish. So let's go ahead and finish this about labor unions. And we just got the CIO and John Lewis. And John Lewis, I told you at the end of yesterday how he punched the head of the engineers union, who did not want to let the riffraff into his union. And so I want to show you one more little bit of John Lewis. So let's make sure this works.
More than a year later.
Protection. They want employment. And they're going to have those things through the leadership and the instrumentality of this new labor movement that you're forming.
Hope you can hear this. And remember, industrial union, that's all workers. Love the eyebrows.
Lewis's main target was the steel industry, the citadel of anti-unionism.
Steel underlay the whole industrial American operation. At the time when we were a country of smokestack industry, we needed steel to make the automobiles. We needed steel for all the purposes of industry. If there was no steel, there was no industry. This was the heart of the matter.
In June 1936, Lewis formed the Steel Workers Organizing Committee, SWOP. The CIO pledged $500,000 to begin the battle with the steel company.
Which is a huge investment.
Lewis chose Phil Murray, vice president of the mine workers, to head SWOP. Murray broke with tradition by including blacks and communists on his organizing team.
There was a ferment that's hard to imagine. People ran out of cards. You know, you went out to organize, you didn't have to plead with people and convince them. They grabbed the cards. They were ready. They'd been long ready.
These are cards to vote for the union.
I never attended a union meeting before, and there was an outside guard. And this guard asked me where I was going. I said, "Is this a meeting of 1014?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'm a member. I'd like to go." He said, "You know the password?" I said, "What password? Never heard of a password." So he looked at me, and I guess he recognized I was sincere. He said, "Well, look, I'm going to give you the password. You're not to repeat it to anybody, whether they're members of the union or not. You're not to write it on anything. You have to memorize it." I said, "Okay." And he whispered to me, "Expansion." I know it.
In the 1936 presidential election, big business spent heavily to defeat Roosevelt and end the advance of unions.
And they just assumed they'd win.
But labor fought back. Unlike the sharecroppers in the South, union members in the North had the vote. The CIO held hundreds of rallies for the president and registered thousands of new voters.
They had real power. Do you see why companies hated them?
Roosevelt made labor's enemies his own.
That this concentration of economic power in all embracing corporations does not represent private enterprise as we Americans cherish it and propose to foster it. On the contrary, it represents private enterprise, which has become a kind of private government and is a power unto itself, a regimentation of other people's money and other people's lives.
Definition of a corporation.
The Roosevelt administration did everything they could to further the interests of the working people.
This guy's father was the head of Republic Steel. We'll get to Republic Steel in just a second.
By the working people, I mean the union people.
He's biased.
Because there was more votes there than there were at any other place else, and I think it was primarily for that reason.
Maybe he believed in
2 months
workers'
after
organizing.
Roosevelt's landslide victory, John L. Lewis began secret negotiations with Myron Taylor, chairman of America's biggest steel corporation, U.S. Steel. Taylor had watched CIO's sit-down strike.
That's in Flint.
Win union recognition after stopping production at General Motors. He did not want to risk a production shutdown at U.S. Steel.
And that was a huge deal when they got U.S. Steel. Now let's get back to a couple things about this. After Roosevelt won, and U.S. Steel saw this, they showed a little bit from Flint. They're going to be called sit-down strikes. And sit-down strikes, getting myself out of the way here. The thing about sit-down strikes were labor unions knew that the best way to stop production is to literally not step outside and strike or picket, but to go in and sit on the assembly line and get a few key workers to not work, and that can shut the entire assembly line. And that's what happened in the winter of 36-37. The United Auto Workers did a sit-down strike at General Motors. And there are a couple pictures of them sitting down. There are family members outside. You see that picture right there with the little kid holding that, and they would smuggle food into their families who were locked into the factory, not allowing production, but and GM cut off heat. And you can imagine how cold it would be in Michigan. I mean, it's 5 steps away from Hudson Bay, but they stuck it out and won. And there's National Guardsmen outside, but the governor of Michigan, knowing that labor unions were popular in his state, did not send them in. GM would recognize the union, and that set off a wave of sit-down strikes, thousands of strikes, a wave of victories. Ford fought it as hard as you could imagine. Ford sent out guards, thugs, to beat up Ford workers. That's part of the reason I wanted you to watch that job at Ford. And we're going to see one of the guys here in a second who was beaten nearly to death. Victor Reuther, whose brother was the head of the UAW, Walter Reuther. And he was nearly beaten to death by Ford workers, or Ford guards. Henry Ford was rabidly anti-labor, anti-Keynesian economics, anti-Semitic. Hitler really liked him. But the sit-down strikes are going to trigger a couple more things. This is at Republic Steel. Tom Girdler was at the head of it. And this would be one of the most dramatic encounters into 1937. And I want to show you this to give you an idea of the tactics that companies would use, how desperate they were to keep labor unions out. At the same time, how not only workers would be determined to get representation and a slightly better life and better working conditions, etc., but also how the National Labor Relations Board worked if you have a president that believed in labor unions. So let's go and watch this. I'm going to fast forward this just a little bit. So they're going to talk about a place called Aliquippa Steel, which won recognition, and then it's going to go to Republic Steel.
That was our right to vote. That was our right to vote for the union of our choice.
SWAC won the election supervised by the Nations Board and negotiated an agreement stronger than the one at U.S. Steel.
So that's the first steel company they mentioned.
Tell me about it. We were really, really happy.
I love how proud the workers are.
That street was loaded with people going up the street, celebrating, hollering, and screaming.
A little job security, a better life.
I tell you.
Now, of course, the company's going to say they're a bunch of communists, but
SWAC and the steel workers believed they had finally brought democracy to Aliquippa, and it now seemed that all of Little Steel would fall.
so U.S. Steel had about 60% of steel production in the United States.
Tom Girdler saw events in Aliquippa as a direct threat to the rights of management.
And so it is some we saw earlier.
In May, he spent $50,000 on arms and ammunition for Republic Steel.
And that was right before they banned machine guns.
A propaganda war, purchasing more than 40,000 pamphlets, which branded John L. Lewis a communist.
And this is an important thing to get about this. This goes back to bomb-throwing anarchists. Now they're calling labor unions communists. You can imagine how before the World War II, this would have a little bit of effect. But after World War II and the Cold War, this had dramatic effect. that labor unions never dealt with. I've been figuring out how to use this. I'm pretty cool, huh?
The opinion of John L. Lewis was not the highest. In fact, he thought he was a louse. Father said that before he would sign a contract with John L. Lewis, he'd go back to raising apples in Indiana. Philip Murray was just as bad.
The Republic cannot and will not be written with an irresponsible party, and the CIO as presently constituted is utterly irresponsible. Therefore, any discussion of this subject is futile.
On May 26th, SWAC called a nationwide strike against Little Steel. The next day, Little Steel picked Tom Girdler to lead their anti-union fight. But workers believed that even Girdler could be defeated. In a show of confidence, SWAC called a Memorial Day rally in a field near Girdler's Republic Mill in South Chicago.
So, Memorial Day outside of Republic Steel in Chicago. And this should remind you what happened at Ford. We saw on the job at Ford.
Absolutely a beautiful
Or Haymarket Affair.
out there like a picnic. We're going to support the steel workers, and we're going to enjoy a picnic day with our families. And it looked like God shone on that idea.
At the end of whatever little party they had, someone said, look, let's go to the plant and set up a picket line. And they started walking towards the plant.
So march around the
People
factory.
were talking and holding hands, and the children were being carried by their fathers on their shoulders, and everybody was singing and joyful and very optimistic, and a feeling that we're going to win this. We're really going to win it. As we came closer to the mill, the walking slowed a bit. Now, I wasn't way up in the front line, but I wasn't very far back either. And what was happening there is that the mill was completely surrounded by cordons of police.
The radical elements created picket lines out there.
So it's the radical elements, communists. That's what, remember his father was the head of the steel.
Plant in on the picket line.
There was rumors around that it was a communist movement oriented. And in that march, the city police were in and protecting the property of the South Chicago plant.
So you really see the different points of view. Pro-worker, this is a family out there, kids, workers out there trying to demand a better life. To those who run the factory, clearly this is a bunch of communists. And the people running the factory only care about what's right for everybody else. And you also get different views towards who should be on top, who should have power. And obviously workers aren't smart enough to decide on their own, so it must be communist-led.
One fellow that was out there at the time told me that he was in the line as an observer. But he said there was a picket he talked to that was carrying a sign that said, "Kill Tom Girdler."
His dad.
He said, I asked him, who's Tom Girdler? He said, I don't know, I just was handed this sign.
I could see a few objects.
By the way, if you believe that story, I have a bridge to sell you.
Through the air. I see some things being thrown. Not much. It wasn't a lot of stuff. Maybe a couple of rocks. I don't know. You could see a couple of things thrown. And then suddenly, it was like the 4th of July. There was a dry, crackling kind of a noise. It took me a moment to figure out what it was, and I realized it was gunfire.
So the guards opened fire, and then the police waded into the crowd. You see them with their nightsticks, so the short clubs. Some have day sticks, which are the long clubs.
As the line was pushing back,
There's day
I was
sticks.
knocked down. And then a whole number of people were piled up on top of me. And I could barely breathe. And when the shooting finally stopped, and the silence prevailed, I looked around, and I saw a battlefield.
I see myself walking around
Okay.
with a gray felt hat.
I'll try to find them on the screen. I'm going to look
With my characteristic
right there.
kind
See where that mouse is? He's right there.
I'm walking around, I'm seeing these people lying on the ground. I'm seeing people handling them like sacks of potatoes. There was some small effort by the strikers to try.
Oh, shoot.
We're taking them into patio.
Sorry about that.
It was clear that a whole number of these people had been shot in the back.
Yes, people were running away.
And they were still being fired at.
Paddy wagons or a police wagon, not an ambulance, even though there weren't very many ambulances yet, and this is 1937.
Unnecessary and got completely out of hand. But to say that the company caused it is an entire fabrication, and I don't know who should shoulder the blame.
10 marchers were killed and 30 wounded.
So got that 10 killed, 30 wounded.
Was suppressed and not shown in movie theaters. Across the country, newspapers reported the incident as a riot by strikers.
So they took film of this and they showed, we talked about this in the 1920s, newsreel that they would show before movies. And these were suppressed, so people never saw peaceful workers getting shot in the back. And they were told all over the country, red, look at that, red chiefs, communists led this. This should remind you of the Haymarket Square. Almost the exact same thing happened when they blamed the anarchists for the murder of those police. Or they blamed the Knights of Labor and arrested and said they're a bunch of anarchists. And the news of this did not get out. And so people didn't know the truth. But the film would be subpoenaed and
inspired by communists.
Not true.
Gunfire at Republic Steel stopped SWAC's momentum. In little steel towns across America, thousands were fired.
Yeah, so they went through and fired anybody who wanted labor unions.
Defeated steel workers began returning to the mills without a contract.
I couldn't believe it because we had been so victorious in Otto against the most powerful adversary in the whole country, the symbol of entrenched wealth and power, and to have the steel workers suffer this kind of a bloody defeat and reprisal sent shockwaves across the whole country.
That's Victor Luthor. His brother was head of the union. He was one of the leaders of the United Auto Workers. And you notice how his jaw's kind of weird? He was attacked by William Bennett, the thug who ran Ford's security guards. He was attacked by a bunch of Bennett's guards and nearly beaten to death, and they broke his jaw in multiple places with clubs. And so he was a tireless fighter for workers' rights. He and his brother were one of the leaders of, I'll give you something that you might know, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in 1963. Most people remember Martin Luther King's speech. Well, it was set up more than anybody else by the United Auto Workers. And United Auto Workers and the leadership of labor unions were tireless fighters for equal rights. There's few organizations that gave more rights to people who are not white men, than labor unions.
So it was a defeat, but it steeled us in our determination to persevere.
Try to sum that up, Sandra.
In testimony before the La Follette Committee and other congressional investigations, Tom Girdler blamed the Memorial Day shootings on John L. Lewis and communist agitators. Girdler contended that there had been no valid reason for the strike.
Workers loved it.
We're running.
I didn't show you the whole video, but there were valid reasons.
Both the men were making the highest wages they ever made.
Were the complaints from the men?
Always in all manufacturing businesses, Senator, in my knowledge, particularly in the steel business, in my knowledge of 35 years, there are always minor complaints. There were no basic complaints as to wages, hours, and working conditions.
So that's a very kind of attitude that a lot of employers, that's kind of a social Darwinistic attitude. There's always been some complaints, but workers, they won't work unless you make them work. That's the attitude.
There were minor complaints.
But this is big.
When the suppressed news film was finally shown to the La Follette Committee, it offered proof
In the Senate.
that the Memorial Day incident was not a riot by strikers. The committee condemned Little Steel for violating the civil liberties of steelworkers. Later, the National Labor Relations Board ordered elections in the mills owned by Little Steel. SWAC won every election.
So they got a union.
Won at Girdler's South Chicago mill.
The Steelworkers Organizing Committee, after the good old steel strike, enlarged its perspective to go into the political activity, so that the sheriffs and the judges would be on our side.
We got our heads together and elected our friends into public office.
He's so proud. I love that.
In fact, we would insist that every member of the union vote. We had carpool, pick them up as they come off their jobs, take them to their polling place, let them vote. When they finish voting, take them home.
We had to take over the town. We had to take over the county. We had to put ourselves in a position where we elected the sheriffs so they wouldn't break up our picket lines. We had to put ourselves in a position we could elect judges where they wouldn't serve injunctions against us to stop us from doing the things we had to do, and to force the company in if we had a strike to give us what we thought was right.
For democracy to be understood and meaningful, it has to be a participatory democracy. You have to have a role in it yourself. Now, voting once every 4 years for a president in Washington or every 2 years for a congressman is very important. But it is equally, if not more important,
This is key.
to be able to participate in determining under what circumstances you will sweat it out every day in the shop for 8 or 10 hours and what you'll be paid for it. And when you're too old to work and too young to die, whether you'll have a little something to take care of you. That kind of participatory democracy is equally important because democracy has
Get
to
this.
stand on 2 feet. One is political, the other is economic.
Did you catch that? I can't even begin to emphasize how important that is. Most people think democracy and politics are just going out and voting occasionally. And it is so much more than that. Democracy and politics, that's how we decide how we'll make a living, how we'll survive. And Victor Reuther says it better than anybody I've ever heard, that what kind of life are you going to have when you sweat it out at work, or when you can't work anymore, what kind of life you have when you have to retire. That is democracy too. And so make sure you get this down. Democracy is both economic and political. It is both. It is combined. They are intertwined. And you can imagine that if labor unions are trying to push this idea that democracy is also how you survive and how you live and what your life would be like is for regular people, economic and political. That is the essence of Keynesian economics, that democracy is political and economic. Trickle-down economics, they want to take that economic part out and say democracy is voting for elected officials and the economics will be decided by the very wealthy because they know what's best for you. Do not forget that. Liberal economics is workers have some right to decide their lives. Conservative, they don't really understand that. And that is the essence of trickle-down economics. Now you can make the argument maybe average people don't understand that, or make the argument that average people do. But it is really important to see that point.
In the years of the Great Depression, the federal government moved to guarantee freedom of speech, of assembly, of association for workers in the industrial North. For disenfranchised Americans in the South, it would be 2 decades before a new movement for civil rights would incorporate the spirit of the Southern Tenant Farmers Union, renewing the fight for full citizenship for all Americans.
And that has never been fully resolved. So, let's get to a little bit the last big element, the legacy of the New Deal. And so we got labor unions, went through this whole thing. So let's get to the last few things. First off, there's my picture of Lyndon Johnson and JFK, because they are definitely liberal presidents, significantly more liberal. In fact, you could say that's our last truly Keynesian president was Lyndon Johnson. But a couple things. First off, government has this duty. And we see it to this day, even though it's so complex, we're seeing it right in front of us, what duty. When we have, the government has a duty, and yet we are much more conservative. And you have a real vacuum of leadership to help the people on the federal government. Next, the executive is going to have much greater power. And think about it. If you're going to have laws carried out by the executive branch, and committees and commissions and regulatory bodies carried out, done by the executive branch, the president will have more power. Next, FDR's idea was government would be a broker state, and to balance the differences, this is balance, balancing the differences between workers and labor, between farmers and those who eat the food or producers, between consumers and sellers. Government will be a broker and try to find the best agreement between the two, because usually throughout history, government has been on one side, those on top against those on bottom. And that's basically the way it is now. And also, this is going to lead to unprecedented prosperity. The why is kind of blocked out. I tried to get over the why, but it's kind of caught in this guy's hat. But there is going to be unprecedented prosperity from end of the 1930s all the way to the end of the 1970s. And unprecedented economic growth in the United States, and you'll see this too in Europe. They're going to call it the European miracle in the 1950s and 60s when they adopted Keynesian economics. And this is where you get the time of the Great Compression, where the gap between the rich and the poor grew at an unprecedented rate, and more people than ever before considered themselves to be middle class. And I got to emphasize that again, middle class Americans who felt that they have a stake in the prosperity of the United States, that they have something to lose if the United States fails. They had trust in the system that worked. And also unprecedented financial stability. And this came from the Glass-Steagall Act, the SEC, from antitrust laws that made sure that no companies got too big. It kept down unbridled speculation. There were no financial panics at all. Nationwide financial panics from 1933, so that's the end of the big run of the banks when Roosevelt became president, all the way to 2008. There were two minor ones when the ending regulation in savings and loans in the 1980s, and then just the first glitch of one at the beginning of your life in 2001, 2002, 2003. And it also set up this Democratic majority. The Democrats would control the House of Representatives all the way to the 1990s. They never lost control. There'd be a little glitch in 52 in the Senate, and then again in 80, but unprecedented Democratic growth. Workers, small farmers, immigrants, most Catholic voters, were all Democrats, and especially African Americans. And we'll get to that in the 1960s. And this would all tumble apart because of the conservative revival. Partially because liberal politicians became complacent, partially because of a continuous effort by conservatives to undermine liberalism, which they turned out to be incredibly successful. They played the long game very well and still have complete control over the economy. Conservatives do now. And so very successful. And I can't even begin to describe the effects of a combination of the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the Women's Rights Movement, and their effect on the New Deal coalition, the Democratic coalition. So that's the legacy of the New Deal. But those are, two of the most liberal presidents in American history. I love that picture. That's in 1960 when JFK was running for president. Somebody said something, and LBJ yelling at him, "How dare you attack?" And JFK, who's the presidential candidate, Lyndon Johnson's his vice president, so Lyndon Johnson right here, LBJ. There's JFK, calm down. I love that picture. And that's the picture of the broker state, kind of generic picture of the broker state. So that's the end of the New Deal. Oh, so we'll get to the broker state again. Hey, perfect timing with the question. And so here is the broker state. Oops. Get me out of the way. So the broker state is, let me get out of the way. I don't want to be in the picture anymore. That's a broker state where government will provide some kind of balance between the differing interests. And so here's between workers and labor, or the differing interests between, I can see me moving out on my other screen, the differences between farmers and producers of, or the food processors, consumers and employers. Government will provide a balance. And the way FDR saw it as, the big thing is between the capitalists and labor. We'll keep a balance and make capitalism work. And capitalism worked fairly well. We are in late model capitalism, and we'll see where that goes. And so with that, let me move myself back. Any more questions? Good. Let me get to one more thing, and let me start a little bit about the growth of fascism. But I should give you an idea how Roosevelt was thinking. He would issue this just as World War II began, and he called it his second Bill of Rights. And he saw this was going to be the third New Deal. So that idea that everybody would have a job and a decent living, a home. Everybody would have this in the United States. So this would be the base minimum that all people would have. Medical care, remember health insurance. And then some kind of Social Security, and then education. Remember I told you about for college tuition. This was going to be a second Bill of Rights, and none of this has happened in the United States. There's no guarantee of any of this. There is a small Social Security, but this has not happened. This has been the goal of the New Deal, and a combination of complacency by liberals and very effective opposition by conservatives. And so on that note, let me get to then the growth of fascism. And so we're starting that right now. New heading, World War II. World War II. There's me. You can see my arms waving. That means World War II. So I'm just going to do a couple things to finish off today. And so we've got that new heading. And we're talking about this, the era between the wars at first and what led to World War II. And that is the map of Europe after the Treaty of Versailles. Now, remember the Treaty of Versailles was actually 4 treaties. We've talked a lot about the Treaty of Versailles. And these are areas that Germany lost. Right here. What was the Austro-Hungarian Empire is now a number of different countries, and Austria is tiny. Austria and Germany were banned from ever unifying the 2 Germanic-speaking countries by the Treaty of Versailles. And these areas in purple, all of those would have to vote sometime down the road of whether or not they'll stay in Germany or stay in Austria. And all of them would vote to stay in Germany or Austria, except for a little tiny area of Belgium, an area around Malmedy. So, that's Europe after the Treaty of Versailles. And Europe was in absolute ruin. There were communist rebellions all over Europe. There was a workers' rebellion and growth in Italy and France, but of course Germany and Eastern Europe was kind of a raging civil war for 3 years. In the brand new country of Turkey would be a civil war all the way until 1923. And in it, we have to get to a new thing, the rise of fascism. A new form of authoritarian government, authoritarian dictatorship that would rise in Italy. And the irony of this is, remember, Italy was one of the victorious countries. When the Treaty of Versailles was originally, or when they first met in Paris for the Peace of Paris, that would come up, the Treaty of Versailles would come out of. Italy was going to be one of the big 4. U.S., Britain, France, and Italy. But Italy was ignored. They felt mistreated. They felt left out of the treaty. They didn't get the areas they were promised. They suffered over 2 million casualties, nearly 1 million dead, and got almost nothing out of it to their point of view. What was that sacrifice for? Is there a difference between fascism and communism? They are complete polar opposites. Complete. Fascism is ultimate social Darwinism. They believe that a tiny group of people should be on top, where communism believes in a socialist state where there are no classes, there are no, there's no group, a tiny group on top running things. In fact, ultimate communism is socialism, with the idea of a class of the society where everybody would have rights, and that includes not just for men, but women, and for people who are of different races, different creeds, nationalities, etc. Now, that is a good question, though, because what's going to happen is, in the Soviet Union, they're going to try to create ultimate socialism, but in the fight to win the Civil War, they adopted the tenets of total war. And out of total war came an authoritarian dictatorship there, where they gave the rhetoric of communism, but created an authoritarian dictatorship. And so you have communists who are saying we're opposed to social Darwinism, fascism, we're for social Darwinism, yet ironically, both would create monstrous totalitarian states, which we'll get to. No, it does not mean that states that want socialism create totalitarian states. It is more complex than that. But, so they're the mortal enemies, fascism and communism. Mortal enemies. So, the big element of fascism, though, is it fits in this modern nation states of intense nationalism. And that's where you have this Italian woman kissing the flag. This intense love of the country, and this weird imagery of kissing the symbol of the country and not what the country stands for. Remember, patriotism is love of your country for what it stands for, what it believes. Nationalism, love of your country because it's your country. And so kissing the symbol of the country, loving the symbol of the country, not the actual country itself. So let's get into fascism. So a little bit about World War I. Italy, disunified by war. When they came out of the war, almost forgot, I jumped the gun here. Italy has always been pretty disunified. There's a huge gap between northern and southern Italy. They were a relatively new country, created at the end of the 1860s. And northern Italy, these principalities here, they had the dominant role in the new Italy of the late 19th into the 20th century. It was the king of Sardinia up here that actually was the king of Italy. And you go there today, there's a big gap. You go south of Rome into Naples, and it is different. The people are different. They have a different society. There's a lot higher poverty rate. In fact, I was just reading about what's happening in Italy right now because of the coronavirus. Northern Italy had the most rates of infection, but southern Italy is the one that's taking the biggest hit because of this. And so with that, and during the war, there was a battle up here called Caporetto where the Italians were decimated, and they never recovered from this. And then at Versailles, they were promised all this land here. They were promised part of what is going to become Albania, and also islands in the Aegean, east of Greece. They were promised all sorts of stuff, and they got very little of it. In fact, there would almost be a fight over a place here called Trieste right here, and they fought over an area called Philip. They sent troops there. And so Italy felt totally mistreated. What was it for? And the idea was that they were tricked into this war while others got rich. And that fit in with a lot of the anti-war movement behind what was going on there. And so we get to the man, Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini. Mussolini actually was a socialist. He was a newspaper editor. He was a very talented man, very suave, could speak 5 languages, a good writer, creative man, but he was a veteran in World War I. And as he saw it, he became very disillusioned by the state. We were let down by weaker people. And that led him to go away from socialism towards right-wing nationalism. As he saw weaker people in this weak Italian democratic republic led them to war. What we need are strong people. Strong men who will lead Italy to greatness. And one of his big slogans, and I almost hate saying this, but we would make Italy strong again or make Italy great again. And I think you understand why I'm reluctant to say this, but that's what he said. Italy was led down a weak road because it allowed weaker people to have power. We must drive them out and only let the strongest people. And I hope you can see from right away, that is the element, the essence of social Darwinism. And that's a big opposite, big contrast to socialism. Socialists and communists believed, ideally, that everybody should have power. No classes, there are nobody naturally superior. Here, what Mussolini is saying, there are naturally inferior people and only the strongest and most intelligent should lead. And here he is leading an element of supporters called black shirts. And he purposely adopted, in fact, I'm just going to get to a couple more things, purposely adopted symbolism of when Italy was great. Rome. The Roman Empire is when Italy was great. And so the fast or the fascio, that was the symbol of Roman justice. And you can see a consul of Rome in this, I believe that's on the Tower of Trajan in Rome. The Arch of Trajan, that arch in Rome. But that symbol was about the strength of the Roman Republic. And what it was is a bundle of rods, fash, bundled together, about this big. One fash alone, easy to break. All the bundled together, strong and powerful. In fact, more powerful, all those individual pieces together than a pole that big. The rods are more powerful. And so that became the symbol of Roman justice, this powerful rod of Rome acting together for Roman power. But at times of danger, when the consul left the actual Roman Republic and went to one of the provinces, this is right at the beginning of just before the Roman Empire, or at times of danger, the Roman consul would have to act as the complete lawgiver, including the power of execution. Thus, the battle axe tied to the fash. And that battle axe tied to the fash became the symbol of the Roman Empire. And that's what Mussolini used. That symbol of the Roman Empire. Italy will be great like it was with the Roman Empire. Italy was mocked and made fun of. They were humiliated in World War I. Heck, they even brought American soldiers to march in front of them to show how, these are what real soldiers are like. Which, of course, the Americans fought with terrible tactics and had horrific casualties. But that didn't matter. All that humiliation was there, and Italy will be great again under Mussolini. And so with that, Mussolini would portray these images of the Roman Republic. And one of the things they used was they wanted to find the Roman salute. Now, no one had any idea what the Roman salute was, what the Romans would do. And so they took that salute, this Roman salute of this hail. And you can see first off there's Mussolini doing it. Here are children learning the Roman salute, soon to be called the fascist salute. And here it's Mussolini doing it with another person who would take many of the ideas of fascism, showing you the influence of Mussolini, Adolf Hitler, doing that salute. So they basically took a made-up version of the Roman salute. Now the ironic thing is, who made it up? Who made up the Roman salute? And this goes back to this idea of the Roman Republic. And a republic was the best form of government that all people, that guaranteed rights to all people. And there's a man named Walter Bellamy who won a contest to write a slogan about what, this is back in the United States in the 1890s, won a contest about writing a slogan, a creed that all people could say to show the superiority of the Republican form of government. Walter Bellamy. And I'm talking, of course, about the Pledge of Allegiance. And he made up a Roman salute for the Roman Republic that all Americans could do to salute the flag. So here are more fascist salute giving the fascist or Roman salute. And here's another picture of young Americans giving the salute that Bellamy made up for what's called the Pledge of Allegiance. And here they are giving the Pledge of Allegiance, which was about not the United States at first, but about the Republican form of government and the best form of government. And so what he's saying here is that, or the Pledge of Allegiance was, you would go, you see my hand up here, right, there in front of the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that's how all little children would say that. Now, after World War I, they added, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. So it went from being a generic Republican, very patriotic thing, to a little bit more nationalistic, to not just a republic, but America, like only the United States has the best form of government. And it's amazing how other people took that. And so here are little children in the 1930s pledging allegiance to the flag in that nice little Roman salute. You could probably see why that went out of fashion. And let's say, let me throw a date out there. Let's say late 1941. But you're going to see American First under Charles Lindbergh all do this and do the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Isn't it ironic that the fascist salute came from the United States, made up version of the Roman salute? And so then you'll see movies about Rome, and they'll go like this, put the fist up. Rah. That's all made up. It was all made up, but taken by the Nazis. And so tomorrow we'll do the fun fascist ideology. So tomorrow, maybe later today, I'll have the new thing for the review packet. But like I told you before, that review packet, it's going to be worth 2 test scores, 400 points. I'm going to reward you immensely, and that'll be a big part of your final. Because, well, let's be honest, it's all going to be up in the air because of what's going on right now. So I'll have that tomorrow. The test is out, and that's going to be 3 short answer questions. I'm going to give you lots of time, but I'd like it done by Friday at midnight. I also have that little quiz, the map, and all those assignments I put a due date. I would like it done by then. But I know stuff is happening. And so please keep track of this. Keep track of this. Please understand I know stuff is happening, so please let me know if you got to turn it in late. I will accept late work. It will accept it late. It tells me if it's late, but please let me know. And also for your notes. On Friday, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give you a little credit for your notes for this week. And snap some pictures, send me the notes. So I will give you some credit. So hold on to these. And you will not get credit if I don't see a picture of it. And I want to see pictures. I'm making a scrapbook for all of you for after this year. Who knows when we'll see. Oh, the Trajan's Tower, that picture of the fascist. If you look at this picture of Mussolini, that's the Colosseum is right to its back, the Roman Colosseum, the arena. And that's the Tower of Trajan in the Roman form. That's it right there. And so if you look very carefully, the picture is right there. Okay, I made that up. I can't see it. Okay, the review packet will not be a bunch of DBQs. The review packet is going to be facts you need to know. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the big facts all the way from 1754 to 1945. You have to jot down a couple bullet points. Because here's the thing about the DBQ. If this is going to be how you use documents, how you use documents in an essay, it's going to be how they grade. It's going to be incredibly important for you to relate documents to specific facts in a DBQ. That is going to be incredibly important. They're not going to be so much grading you on if you can summarize the documents. In fact, they're not going to grade that at all. And they're going to assume that you're going to have facts because you're doing it at home. In fact, one of the reasons they're doing this is they're doing it with a DBQ is they don't want you to just Google facts and copy them. You go on the Google and look on the Wikipedia. So what they're really going to look at showing how you can take what you read in a document and relate it to facts. So if I give you this list that you fill out of all the big facts, so let's say that we don't know what the DBQ is going to be on, but we get the topic area. Let's say it's on the events leading to the Civil War. You're going to be able to turn to that page in there and have all of those things that you've already studied and looked at. And so when you quick read the documents, you know, and you have it right there, the facts you can use. So it's going to be more like questions. And just a couple bullet points. And this, I don't know, a better way for you to prepare than to have that information in front of you, so when you read the documents, you can quick have that factual information that you've already looked up in front of you. You're only going to have 45 minutes. And so I don't even think we're going to work on a 5-paragraph essay. I think we're going to go to a 4-paragraph. Good opening with context, which I'll talk more about, 2 body paragraphs with 2 documents apiece, and then a closing. And that's all we're going to have time. All we're going to have time. 45 minutes is going to go by like that. That's about 15 minutes less than what we're going to give you on the original AP exam for a DBQ. And so your factual knowledge, having that in front of you, is more important than ever before. And some of you might be thinking, well, can't you just like print us out a copy of it and we can look at it? That won't do you any good. Because if I print out the copy, you have to relearn it. You have to relearn it. Here, you've already gone over it, thought about it, taken something in your mind, and then wrote it down in a couple bullet points. So you have had to think about it and learn it. So it'll be much easier, hopefully. So with that, I will have that for you tomorrow, maybe at the end of the day today. If there are no more questions, yeah, I can't see why you're going to be able to do it at home. So you're going to be sitting in front of the computer with your information in front of you. So yes, on the AP exam, you'll be able to use that. It's operating on the expectation that it's not going to be it's not going to be a secure test as they normally would have done in the past. How did I do this? If I know anything different, but that's the way it's going to look like it's going to be. That's why they're only giving you 45 minutes, so you don't have excess amount of time to look things up, because they're already operating on the assumption is you're going to be able to look things up. That's why they put the time limitation on. So if we have a time limitation, we have to be as ready as possible once that moment you start. But I do understand this. Once you click on that, saying that you click start and you see the documents, you have 45 minutes and done. At the end of 45 minutes, there'll be no more typing, no more anything. You're done. So if there's no more questions, I'm going to stop streaming. And oh yeah, don't forget tomorrow I'm going to do a meeting, do a quick little talk if anybody has any questions. If not, we'll move on from there.